Hi, my name is Samantha Mirabal. I am with Melco's applications team, and today we're going to be going over how to manage texture, and other softwares call it all kinds of things. So it's what you see on the screen. Oops, let me first get to that. Sorry. There we go. So, window view. All right, neat. Is it working? I hope so. All right, looks like it's working. So what we're going to be going over is how to create what you see on the screen here with this, kind of underlay, which holds it down high and will compress your texture and give you a nice foundation to lay it on. So why would you want to do this? There's all kinds of different garments and styles and things that you can sew on. I know Sherpas, particularly in the winter, are really popular. So what can happen with these, though, is you'll start embroidering on it, and next thing you know, all the fur is kind of eating your monogram or your text. So it starts obscuring it, making it harder to see. So you've got, if you put down an underlay first, think of it as if you're painting the wall, right? So if I'm going to go paint the wall, I'm not just going to grab my nice expensive paint that I want the wall to end up in, because half it's going to soak into the drywall, right? So instead, I'd want to put a primer down. Well, in that same reason, when we go to sew out on these sorts of things, what you can do to help hold that texture down and get it out of the way is put an underlay there that compresses that fur, compresses the texture or the high ply of the fabric, so that when you do your monogram, it'll stand up nicely. So whether it's on these Sherpas, blankets, I know you can also do these on beanies. I think they're called toboggans up north. I don't know, I call them a beanie. But I know sometimes you'll see that those are hard to do. They stretch around and hard to hoop. Well, if you do that underlay first, before you put your design on top, it can help stabilize it and prevent some of that movement as you're actually embroidering on your toboggan, on your thing. So here are a few examples of, a stocking. I got these off of one of the Facebook groups. I put their names of who I borrowed it from. But you put an underlay. If you match it to the fabric that's underneath it, then you don't really notice it as much. Now, if you do a really big block, it can be kind of an eyesore. So I do prefer, personally, sculpting it a little bit closer to the text or to your design so that it's not as noticeable and it's actually just holding your texture down and keeping it out of the way. Here, just like I said, a few examples. So, well, I'm going to jump over to Design Shop in a second, but it's really just an underlay. Okay, so I'll show you a bunch of different ways that you can put it together. But it compacts your texture. One of the nice things that I like about it is you can help kind of minimize the need to use solvay, because if you do that first, it's going to hold all the fur down, so when you do your embroidery on top, you don't need the solvay as much. You can still use it. It's not a bad thing to have, but you can sometimes get away with not using a solvay. Now, don't just think about this as a primer or a knockdown or whatever you want to call it. You can use it as an underlay for designs. So let's say you're sewing on something that's got a lot of movement to it. Well, if your fabric is moving around and not stabilized well, you're not going to get a good sew out. You'll get puckers, you'll get all kinds of weird effects that are less than desirable. So by putting an underlay down under your design, you can do the entire design rather than doing it one piece at a time. That might be a way to help stabilize your fabric before you go into sewing your final design. So you can use it for that. You can use it on anything with texture, stretchy materials. Don't think of it just as for holding texture down. It's really versatile. It's just, what can you imagine to do with it? Okay, so I did put here just some examples of stuff I'm going to show, mainly as reminders to myself. I'll show you how to use some of these features to quickly create one of these sort of things, and then how we can sculpt it. I'm going to show you doing a bunch of different ways, because I know some of the features that I personally like to use are not available in Design Shop Standard. You have to have Pro or Pro Plus to use them, and not everyone has that. But I always like to tell people, work with the tool you have until you start banging up against its limitations. So let's start off. I'm in Design Shop. Hopefully you can see it. Oops, that was a bad idea. Okay, so we're in Design Shop right here, and what we're going to do is look at these shapes down here. So you'll see there's this auto shape input. So one of the nice things like this, let's say you're doing a quick project and you just want to put some text down. and you want to be able to have that texture management, but you don't know how to digitize, or you don't want to spend the time digitizing. If you click on these down under custom designs and common closed shapes, you'll see there's a lot of tools here. Okay, so let's say I want an oval, so I can left click and drag it onto the screen, and at the moment that's not the look I'm going for, right? So I'm just trying to compress the texture, not just embroider a big fill area. So first things I'm going to do is, over in our project view on the right hand side, I'm going to go and delete the stuff we don't need. Okay, that brought in stuff that I don't want, so I'm going to delete those first 4 elements. So just to delete, select and delete. So I'm just hitting my delete key, and it leaves me with a fill. I also don't need the border, so I'm going to delete that. Now all I'm left with is one fill in an oval shape. Okay, so that's a good start. Now we need to modify its properties. To get to the properties, you have a few different options. I can right click on it, go to properties. I usually just double click, and it brings you to the same thing. Now with the properties, you have what's going to create that underlay is the underlay tab and your top stitching tab. So on the top stitching tab, what you want to do is set the density to something bigger. The larger you get, the further apart your fill is going to be. So it's somewhere 20 to 30. You can create a fill that way. And then if I go to the underlay tab and turn on a fill underlay, if I just use it like that, notice what happened. My underlay is not coming to the edge of my element, it's backed up. That's because the border margin here is set to 10. So if I set the border margin to 0, now my underlay is going to go all the way to the edge of my wireframe, okay, which is what I want here. Now on top of that, the density, I personally would rather have these as squares rather than rectangles. It's a personal preference, whatever makes you happy, really. You'll find that all of us have different preferences of what we think looks pretty, and that's all good. Okay, so whatever looks good to you, use. But here's one example. So if I set my density here to 30, now I've got these nice little squares compacting it, and now I've got a really quick frame that I can add some text to, or whatever design I'm going to put on top of it. So let's say, just for quick, I'm going to put some text on there. Well, that would be one way I could do this. All right. Now, the other thing you can see is I've got these little short stitches here. They're not really short stitches. It's where it's going from here, jumping to the next line as it's sewing back and forth. So on here, if I want to get rid of those, this is a feature that's only available in the higher levels of Design Shop, but you'll see there's this trapunto button. When you click on trapunto, it gets rid of that angled stitch and makes all the stitching go to the edge of the wireframe before it goes down to the next level and starts going back and forth. And if you just want to clean it up even more, you can always trace the border. So now it goes to the edge, plus it does a nice outline all the way around. Okay, so that's kind of quick and easy of how you'd create these. Now, you can do that with any shape. Let me show you one quick trick. Let's say you do this once and you really like the properties of this. It sewed out well, you want to save it. So save it off somewhere. Now you have another project, you need a different shape. Okay, so I'm going to start a new project, drag my new shape out here. Okay, so I drag it up there, and again I do the same things. I delete what I don't want. Oops, hold the shift key. Delete what I don't want, and then I'm going to delete the border. Now, instead of changing all the properties again, what I could do is go to that thing I started with first. So open up your sample, if you will. Okay, so when you open up that right here, see there's 3 buttons at the top. The middle one is copy properties to clipboard. So if I copy those properties, is that showing? Oh, anyway, if I copy the properties there, then what I can do is go back to my other design, select the shape I want to paste those properties onto. So this one, and now I'm going to paste properties, and look, I didn't have to go modify those all. So that's another way you can just get a little bit faster. So if you don't always remember, what did I use for that? You don't have to worry about it. Just set it up once, open up that previous file, copy your properties, paste it over, you're good to go. Okay. Now, that's the downside to these is if you sew a big block, if it's not sculpted around it, sometimes it starts looking a little bit weird. And I meant to show this earlier. Let me quick show you. I had an example. I found this blog that just had great pictures, so I didn't take any pictures. of why you would want to do this. So you can see if you've ever sewn on something with a texture, you see things like this, where the fur starts kind of encroaching on it. So if you kind of scroll down, you can see here, that's one way to do it, trim out the fur. I'll tell you, that's not anything I enjoy doing. It's a way to save a project, but I prefer not to do it personally. So another way you can always do that is, rather than trimming it, is do kind of this, what we've been discussing here, an underlay. Okay? So that just kind of holds all the texture down. All right. So let's try this again. So let's say this time instead I'm going to do a name. So all I did is click on the lettering. I'm going to make it, I don't know, that font. Kerning is weird. Let's move that over. And I like it a little bolder. Okay, so let's say we have some text, and now we want to put a primer stitch underneath there. Okay, so we've got to start. Now I need to put something under there. So I can start with a rectangle that we have here, drag it on, and to do what we just did, let me show you another way to create it. So instead of dragging these auto shapes down here, let's create our own. So over here, we have our digitizing tools. If you go down to the third one on the left, that's your select complex fill. You can also get to it by insert complex. It gets you to the same thing. Okay. So, or control shift and the number 0. And the other thing I'll show you is down here, there's these automatic input tools. They're time savers anyway, because this one will automatically create circles and ovals. This one will be a square or rectangle. So I left click on one side, drag across to the other, and paste. Okay, well, I want that underneath. So we've got to start. Now that's stitch direction wise. I don't care for the horizontal personally, but the other thing we can do is I can paste my properties. Remember, I still have it in my properties up here. So if I paste it there. So all that did was it made my density 30, and it made the underlay with a border margin of 0 and a density of 30. Okay, well, what if we want to sculpt this? All right, so if you don't have Design Shop Pro Plus, you're not going to have the offset tool. So you've got lots of options of what you can do. So let's just kind of work through do a few. So I've got our rectangle here, and I want to kind of sculpt it. So I'm going to get it closer to my shape to start with. Okay, oops, stupid mouse. There we go. All right, so that's a little better. All right, so I'm going to start there, and now I'm going to put a left click here and a left click there. And that's because what I want is a curve between those 2 points. So then if I grab the triangle between, and this time I'm going to hold the control key, left click and drag. Notice what that did. It made a perfect arch between those 2 points. Okay, so let's do that same thing over here. I'm going to click. Anytime you're doing, this is called wireframe editing. So anytime you're doing this, make sure you select the shape first that you want to edit. So whether you click on it over here or over in your project view, it doesn't matter. So I'm going to left click there, left click here. Again, select the point where I want the curve to go, hold my control key down on the keyboard, left click and drag, and it makes a curve. Okay, so that's looking a little nicer. Well, then I can, again, select this, and all I'm doing is adding points along here and dragging them around until it sculpts it however I want. Okay, so what is right? Whatever looks good to you. I don't think there's any right or wrong answer. It's, guideline wise, I would say aim to have this distance, if you will, 20 to 30 points minimum, especially if you have a lot of texture to your fabric. But it's the best thing you can do is sew out what you like, and when you find something that is your formula, remember it, write it down, save it to a file to open up and reference later, things like that, because like I said, we are all different. We all have different opinions of what's pretty, what looks nice, what not. So, just play with it, figure out what you like. Okay, so all I'm doing is moving these wireframes around to edit the wireframe to kind of sculpt it a little closer. And again, I'm selecting the shape, adding a point by left clicking, and then just dragging them around. Like this one I can drag down here. Okay, so that would be, a slightly more sculpted version just by wireframe editing. Well, what if instead of doing, starting with a rectangle, let's do again a complex fill. And this time, let's just eyeball it. So I start with the left click, and now I'm going to right click around my curve. So all I'm doing is, kind of eyeballing it. Here, I might as well have a straight line going across. So I'm going to do a straight line by holding the alternate key down. That makes the line stay horizontal. And then again, I'll kind of work my way around this guy. So right clicks are curves, left clicks are straight points. And yeah, that's good enough. There we go. Okay. When you get to a point where, since this is a complex fill, that you just want it to close, you hit enter. There's our fill. Remember, you have visual cues on the screen as to what the software is expecting you to do. So you notice the little arrow on my screen is no longer just an arrow. It's now an arrow with a floating hole. That's this button, and then down here you also see it says input hole or hit enter. Well, I have no holes in this, so I'm just going to hit enter. The circle and the X, again, is your visual cue. What does it want? Give it a start and stop point. So entry point, exit point. And again, the arrow with the box and the line between it, that's the stitch direction one, which is this one. So left click and drag. All right, so now I have a fill. Again, now I just have to modify the properties to make it more open, so we can reduce our stitch count and just get a nice underlay without a heavy stitch count. And I can paste properties, or I can come over here and set my underlays up. So I'm going to set the border margin to 0, density to 30, angle, let's do 90. And this one, I leave at 30. And I like the look of Trapunto. Like I said, that's not available in the lower levels of the software, but it's there. Okay, so that's just eyeballing it around. Now, if you have the higher levels of the software, we can actually take any shape and convert it over and offset it to get an exact, closer sculpting, similar to what you saw in this. You see how it's kind of sculpted around, or at least this one, it's sculpted around the text. So let's go do it. All right, so let's turn that one off. Again, I have my text. All right, so what we're going to do is I'm going to copy and paste that. So copy paste, Control C, Control V, however you want to copy paste. Control C, Control V. Okay, now I'm going to convert it over. A lot of ways to convert. Okay, right here there's a box. See the box that has the 2 arrows pointing from side to side? All right, so that one is where you can actually read. So if you don't remember the hotkeys on the keyboard, you can go, all right, I'm going from lettering element to, what do I want it to be? I want it to be a fill. So I'm going to say complex fill, and I'm going to say add. All right, so I'm going to turn off the lettering just so you can see it. So, not too pretty yet, but that's all right. Now that it's a fill, we can use the offset. So, object, offset, outline, or right click, operations, offset, outline, all takes you to the same spot. All right, when you do that, type in 20 or 30 points. That's how much bigger it's going to make it, how much of a pad you're going to have around your shape. Okay, so that's bigger. It's a bunch of elements now. We need to combine them. So they're all still selected. Up here, you'll see there's combine elements. If I click that, now it's all one element. Well, one other fun fact or fun tip is we don't want these holes, so I want to delete the holes. So I'm going to select the shape. Then you can click on the hole and hit the delete key. Click on the hole, hit the delete key. Voila. Now we have a shape that matches our text. And if I put the text on top, you'll actually be able to see that. Okay, so what do? We're going to go into our properties of that shape. We're going to say our stitch type, leave it at fill. Again, I'm just going to paste the properties. So there we go. And again, that's density of 30, and 30, 20, 40, whatever looks good to you. All right. The smaller the number, the smaller these little squares will be. The bigger the number, the more open and the more texture is going to come through. Okay. So there we have another one. Now, let's look at some other things we can use this for. The exact same technique. So it's really versatile. You can do so much with it. Don't limit yourself to just this, what you see here. What about doing an embossing of some sort? Or maybe even having a little fun with this. So let's turn off the text. And actually, let's make it bigger. Sorry, I'm changing my mind. Let's make this 5 inches or something. So it's a big, it's 5 inches, and the shape did something weird. I don't like that. Let's get rid of that. Okay, sorry, it's not really relevant, but there we go. All right, so we're going to take that, and let's go into properties again. Up here where stitch type, we have it say fill. We can also change it to decorative. And decorative is a whole lot of fun. So let's say we did spin. Spin is neat. So if I apply spin, well, look at that now. Now I've got a tack down, you know, an underlay that's got a pattern to it. And you can be really creative with these sorts of, oops, I don't want that one. You can be really creative with these sorts of things and to get different patterned looks to it rather than just those squares. So when you use these, keep in mind there's properties here you can play with. So if the spacing between these are all too much, you can reduce these. So, you know, 75, 75, you know, whatever. You play with the numbers until you get the look you want. It is everyone has different opinions, so play with it. Oh my goodness. I'm on a live thing. Wow, I'm sorry. That was scary. Okay, now that I've embarrassed myself. All right. Okay, so those are decoratives. Now, so that's one way we can add a little bit more interest, if you will. But, I mean, it to some degree doesn't matter. If you're going to sew that in the same color of the fabric, then whether it's patterned or not, it doesn't buy you a whole lot. Well, let's do an embossing. So let's say I have this thing. Okay, so I drew this. I'll see if anyone wants it. I guess I can give it to Nate and the guys and they can put it up. Anyway, so I've got the shape. Let's say we want to do this as an embossment. We're going to put it on a towel or a blanket where the heart, the blue stuff is going to be the garment itself coming through, so the fur, the texture, and the white is going to be the underlay, the primer stitch that's going to compress it down to give you an embossed look. So this is a vector, so this is yet another technique so that you can work with. Yeah, sorry. So here I've got our center one, and this is what we want to turn into a fill. When you're working with vectors, it's really easy to create these. So I can take the shape, I can do insert stitch direction, left click and drag, and that will give me a fill. Okay, so that's quick. Well, again, we don't want it to look like that, so I'm going to paste my properties, and now I have this one. So let's make that pink. All right, so now I've got that. So I've got the tack down, so now the heart's going to stand out. Well, if I want to outline it, okay, let's say we want to put a satin border around this. All right, so to do that again, the hotkeys would be you select the shape, hold your shift key down, and then single line center is a constant width column. All right, so if I click the shape, shift, click there, I get a constant single line center around my shape. So now I've got a border to it. 20 is kind of thin. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Oh my goodness. Numlock's not working. There. All right, so now I've got a border around it. So that's already looking pretty good. Now with this shape, let's say I want to put another satin around here, just to kind of add a little bit more definition. So again, I select the shape. Rather than hitting shift and click, you can again click on the boxes with the arrow. And again, say single line, add. All right, I don't need the center one. Center one's already done. So there's the outer one. Now let's make that, turn on numlock, because it's going to make it crazy. There we go. So now I've got that. Make it red, let's say. All right. So there you go. we've got a design. If I turn off the vector, you can see what's left. All right, so this would compress the texture, the fur in here. It would leave the loops of your towel sticking up in these areas, or the loops of your blanket sticking up. So you would have like a reverse, you know, it's an embossing essentially. All right, so let's see. We looked at our auto shapes. We did the decoratives. Let me see if I had anything else. Doing these sorts of things. As you saw over here, you know, you can use it on anything. So in this sort of format, to go around a design to stop the texture from going over it, within your text here, I don't know, all kinds of things. So let's see, questions. Judy asks, is there a list of hotkeys so you can print them to remember them? I don't know. Mike? I honestly don't know. Some of them, actually, let me take that back. Some of them are. So if you go to your question mark up here, that will take you to the manual. If you go to page 159, I believe, Control F, 159, enter. Yeah. Okay. Page 159 is some of them. So that, you know, when I was converting over into a curve, I held the shift key, control key down, clicked and dragged. That is in here, and it looks like Mike put a link there for the hotkeys. I just know them, and I don't really know how, other than probably banging on my keyboard. Anyway, any other questions? Like I said, don't limit yourself to just textures. You can do this for all kinds of fun things. All right. Any other questions? If not, I hope this was helpful. Let's see. I don't see any other questions, although I can't really tell. All right. Well, I hope this was helpful for you. Go, you know, play with it. Do some neat things. Like I said, it's really easy to do. There are a bunch of videos on YouTube that you can find. You'll have this up there later to reference, so it'll be on both Melco's Facebook as well as the YouTube channel, so you'll be able to find it there. But it really is as simple as create your fill. So create a fill shape. That's using complex fill. So draw whatever shape you want. Go into your properties of that fill. Change your density. I mean, it can be that simple as change this fill 0, 30, 90, turn this one off, apply, and you're done. So it doesn't have to be super complex, and you can get really big benefit out of it. All right, so have fun, happy sewing, and sorry I jumped like a fool. All right, have a good one.